How y'all doing? Good. Awesome. I am glad to be here, and I had fun making this presentation. I'll talk a little bit about what it is and what it isn't. I wanted to poll the audience, though, a little bit. Who is mainly an Angular developer? Okay, it's over here. In my current role, I'm using Angular 2. So, what?
Are you putting Angular JS in this?
Sure.
Oh yeah.
Sure. Okay. How about Vue? Who has an actual Vue role right now using Vue? It's over here. And React? Okay. Anything else? Any other framework? No framework? Okay. All right. Well, let's get started. Wanted to thank UtahJS for this opportunity. I actually got a degree in vocal performance, and so I'd rather sing in front of hundreds of people than present for a number, like this. But I love programming, and so that's why I'm here. I have to be really scripted, and so I'm reading my notes. But the title of my presentation is Why Love Vue? And yes, I had a little fun with these 3 JavaScript framework logos. So a little bit about me. I'm going to do a little intro here. I'm a designer. I utilize UX and UI design principles in my work, but I primarily am a developer. I actually chose development over design currently. As a developer, I also lay down Wicked code to get the job done via front-end web development technologies. I work for a software technology group, which is an elite consulting firm who is always hiring. Let's see, we're hiring for Angular, Node, and Java, just so you know. And they have an amazing business model. And basically, like, in between projects, you get paid for learning and ramping up. It's pretty cool. I'm roughly 3 years old in developer years. The journey's been amazing. And I started my journey in tech at well, I didn't start there, but I went to the Iron Yard. It was a boot camp where I attended a fully immersive coding boot camp and survived. And my instructor actually is here tonight, which is Sean Duncan. So I have a lot of thanks to him. He's been great. And it's, of course, like drinking from a fire hose. So let me tell you a little bit about what my presentation will not be. Today won't be a sales pitch to convince you that Vue.js is the very best framework all the time. I won't be able to fit everything in that deserves to be showcased or mentioned, and I'll miss some things, I'm sure, so forgive me. We won't be engaging in a demo or live coding together to demonstrate how to use Vue.js, and I'll keep this fairly high level for the sake of time, nothing too sophisticated. But what this presentation will provide is hopefully a clearer picture of what Vue is. You'll get to see a little code. We'll look at some intriguing comparisons between some JavaScript frameworks. And I hope to fuel the fire and spark your curiosity so that you'll go and give Vue a try. And I intend to give you a few building blocks to code up some Vue awesomeness someday in the near future. So here are the 4 sections of this presentation: context, comparison, anatomy, and resources. Let's begin with a story to illustrate a little context. Once upon a time, there lived 3... Actually, let me stop here. I'm a father of 7, and so we do a lot of stories every night, so this is kind of like what we do. So once upon a time, there lived 3 programming languages, HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Web developers came from far and wide to test their skill, and if wielded nobly, would create happy little websites all over the World Wide Web. There had never been better days. In fact, it was an amazing time, right? The internet, websites. But as technology evolved, so did the needs and requirements of users and systems, and the world began to change. And so things got pretty sad and complicated for websites and their masters. You see, every time data changed or users navigated pages via menu bars, which changed data, the entire page had to be re-rendered, like refreshing the page with new information. Also, more server-side code was being moved into the browser with no formal organization. This became increasingly bad and nasty and oh so painful. The concept of single-page applications was born. So, and some of you are old enough to remember some of this, right? So I'm going to bring up kind of three ideas here. One, bandwidth, which is concerned with the ability to transfer data to and from multiple endpoints, became an issue with increasing data sizes and client-side computing going back and forth. SPAs, or single-page applications, could alleviate such like this problem. The second thing is, so servers, let's see, a SPA is a web application or website that interacts with the user by dynamically rewriting the current page rather than loading the entire new pages from a server. So when the user would interact with the page, there would be a lot of load on the server to grab the new page and render it, and have that data available to render. So, so the SPA concept freed up, the server load. And the other thing is, web loading experience, user experience 15 years ago included clicking on a menu item, watching the screen flash and sometimes turn white and remain white for multiple seconds, then finally viewing the desired destination that you were hoping to visit. That kind of experience needed to be revamped, resolved, replaced. Single-page applications did that. So our solution was a model view controller design pattern, right? And there were other things, but this is one example I wanted to bring up. It's called an MVC. It decouples major components, allowing for efficient code reuse and parallel development. So this concept was a desktop application concept and pattern. And so what basically happened was this came over to the web, right? To web applications. So now, you can update parts of the app in the browser when you couldn't before. So here's how it works generally. The user uses the application, right? The controller responds to the user input and performs interactions on the data model objects. The model is responsible for managing the data of the application and sends the updated representation of the data to the Vue layer. And the Vue layer then represents the updated data in a particular format. The user then sees the update and the process begins again. So again, we're kind of telling a story. This is context a little bit of how it used to be and how it's evolved. I want to point out here that two major issues, some of the two major issues that were to be addressed, among others, right, was how to update components after menu navigation, like not re-rendering the page, which is routing, and the managing of the state of each component upon user interaction and the change of data. So the example I like to bring up is if you've got like this clock or something like that, every minute it changes. Let's change just that instead of the whole darn page. The cause is just that 1 minute changing every time. That's a lot of work to be done to update that second or minute, and affect everything else. It just didn't make sense, right? But that's the only way they knew how to do it at the time. So frameworks that used this SPA concept as well as the MVC design pattern began to materialize and take shape and find use cases by the developer community. So we went from this guy, which was still admirable in its day, right? Super awesome, to this dude, which is breathtakingly amazing, especially for the pilots, right? So, the story continues, even now, as today's noble website creators bravely wield the vast array of technologies now available to update only what needs to be updated on every happy little website on the World Wide Web. The end. Okay, so that's the story. And beyond that, I'll just add that we have a lot of tools that we now have to put into this, build tools and things on top of these concepts. And so as developers, we have to have like a growing tool belt, right? Which is good because, you know, as human beings, who wants to just sit in a chair and just waste away, right? We want to like learn. For me, I went into programming because I was in sales, and I just looked down the road 5 years and said, I'm just going to be the same person, probably, right? Just kind of doing the same thing, but not in programming, right? And it's a double-edged sword, right? It's hard to keep up, but it's good for us, I think. So let's look at some comparisons. Let me offer this idea, though, before we jump in. So some context. Here's some context as we move through this comparison exercise. So why do things exist? Why do people create things? Normally because they're needed, right? And this can kind of seem like it's in left field for a second. To solve a problem, big or small. So as we're going through these comparisons, think about your problems, right? The question here in this presentation is, why love Vue, right? Well, what kinds of problems do you have to solve, and will you be able to see if Vue will solve your problems, perhaps better than the rest? That's kind of the thought. Okay, I can't answer that, but I'm hoping I might be able to help a few of you in this endeavor, if it exists, right? But really, sometimes the choice of a framework just comes down to either technical taste, right? There's a list of 5 things. Your job, your time, which one you started first, you know, and it's like, it all depends, right? Think about why you use the framework you use now. What are those reasons? So whether that's helpful or not, I don't know, but try to think about maybe your situation and what problems could be solved. Because if for example, Vue you can learn pretty quickly, like maybe that's not important to you. Maybe you have time to learn a large framework, and that's not a big deal, right? But some people are like, you know, maybe a startup. We need something quick so we can get some cash flow, right? So that's an example. So let's look at a few frameworks here. Yeah, that's a lot. So some of these have, I mean, I don't know what to say about them, but I'll just say what's right here. Here are a few examples of JavaScript frameworks and libraries that have been on the radar in the past, and some that still are alive and flourishing. I'm sure many of in this room have used several of these. However, as most of us know, the human spirit and drive doesn't settle for less, and the world changes and evolves. Thus, some have come and gone. The ones on the right, however, are at the forefront. Currently, Angular, Vue, and React are the 3 we will focus on today. So let's dig in a little bit. So this slide represents some of the basic facts. For example, today it's 2019. AngularJS was released in 2010. However, today's Angular is nothing like AngularJS. Is that correct? Okay. But AngularJS definitely had its place. Angular 2, I did my best research, was released in 2016. Though Angular is large, it compiles now to a much smaller size. So there used to be an argument against Angular that's just too big, but it's evolved into a great place when it comes to the size. Vue and React core only deal with the Vue layer of the MVC model. And while the community for Vue is admirable, the ecosystems of the others are far richer in resources and community members. So here are a few companies that are using some of these frameworks. Notice all three columns have large companies listed. What does that tell us? The world is really using all three and making things happen. Why are they using these particular frameworks? To tell you the truth, I'm convinced that a few of these companies, if not most, could be represented in multiple columns. So they're probably using, maybe a company's using Angular and Vue, and another one's using React. In fact, the company I work for, we're doing Angular and React, where I'm at right now. So there's use cases. So a breakdown of the YouTube core repo popularity. So some of this may or may not mean much to you. So all of these are data points, we'll say, right? One thing to note is that the Vue framework has grown in popularity at a very rapid rate. So Vue has gone like this, like skyrocketed. React has also seen a similar trend, which should tell us something that React, so both being so similar, there's no question that we're on the right track. So there's something about perhaps, React and Vue, maybe they're lightweight, maybe, I don't know, that could be something to think about. Like why has the community, why has the market really taken to these two frameworks, right? And we're not leaving Angular behind either, but there's a question there. There's something about that. So runtime performance. The point here is that runtime performance is not significantly different and shouldn't be a major factor when choosing any of these frameworks. Rest assured, all three frameworks are very performant. Does that sound right? From what I've read, that's what the world is saying. So criteria there, based on that criteria, I think they're all fabulous when it comes to being performant. So scaling up. All three frameworks have available to them robust routing and state management libraries, right? That can help build complex applications. This is why the list of companies that are using each of these frameworks was not lacking in large international corporations. So they can scale up well. The app that can be built with any one of these can be massive, though scaling down is a different story here. So what do I mean by scaling down? So this is, to me, this is what it meant. It might mean some different to you, but basically what is the least amount of code I have to write to use the given framework in all its wonder? So, for example, as we see here, React and Vue is pretty simple. I don't know if you know this website, Unpack. Is it Unpack? It's not up here, but you can do it with Vue too, unpack.com. Use that. You bring that in with your script tag, and Vue is super, and I'll show you a little later, but Vue is just super simple. React is a little bit more. You got to do a little bit more, but not much. And Angular is it's kind of tough to do it, to scale down. So, and that's not bad, you know, because the thing is, Angular targets more enterprise, right? So it's a endeavor, a company. I don't know if it's a company, but it's a product that is targeted towards possibly a different market, right? So maybe, you know, it's not a bad thing that it can't scale down or it can't do some of the things that Vue or React or it's just different. It's just kind of the way it is. So Angular and Vue use classic web technologies in their components. However, React uses JSX, which is JavaScript XML. HTML structures are expressed in JavaScript, basically in React, through a render. What is it called? No, there's a word for it, but render. Anyway, a function, basically, a render function. And based on recent trends, so I'm going to point out a little bit the difference with syntactical difference. Based on recent trends, CSS is also being expressed in JavaScript, right? So what this means is you have basic HTML. Like if someone's a beginner, you know, they can pick up, they can use a component with Angular or Vue and use, you know, HTML, you know, tags. With JSX, it's a little different. So if someone doesn't know JavaScript, it's going to be harder to pick up React. I think I got all on that. Okay, so let's see. Okay, sorry. All right, so so components. I'm going with directives. Directives are present in both Angular and Vue. However, React does not use them. A directive is essentially a function that executes when it is found in the DOM. So it's basically an attribute, right? The function can do almost anything. You can, like in Vue, you can create your own directives, and in Angular, I'm pretty sure. And then basically directives give elements superpowers and so forth. We'll look at a few of those. So components exist as self-contained units with their own view and logic data. By the way, one thing I didn't do on this presentation is put a lot of text in the slides. I put a lot of it in my notes. And so that's probably something that I'll change in the future. But components are truly at the core of design for all three frameworks. And so that was the idea, really, right? To create a component that changes, to have its own state, and then to plug it in, right, where it needs to be plugged in, decoupling. So all three are you know, that's a foundational principle. So the reuse of code achieved through components is also important. So you can loop through a component, but give it different data each time it loops through, based on the source of, you know, the object or array it's pulling from, which is pretty powerful. That's crazy. So dry or don't repeat yourself programming, that's what that is. All of this has become a standard in programming, and frameworks have facilitated this migration to such practice. So I'm not an expert in all three of these. but this is kind of what I learned about components. Angular components contain metadata that is used with the component. And I think the decorator takes that and spits it out with the proper data, right? Vue components have their own, they're basically their own instance. And I'm kind of excited to show you the code on some of the Vue stuff. React components manage their own state, has the state at the top. If you're not using like Redux or Flux. Since component logic is written in JavaScript instead of templates, you can easily pass rich data through your app and keep state out of the DOM. So that's React verbiage there. So companionship libraries, right? So there's two major ones, routing and state management. So Angular router is part of the core, but the state management piece is not. I think it's called RxNG or something. GRX? NGRX. With React, thank you. With React, both are independent of the core library. With Vue, however, it's called Vue Router and Vuex. Those are maintained with the core library. So again, when you're using any of these frameworks, you can strip out a lot of stuff, right? You can use just the core libraries, but you can also add these libraries that can come with it. Some of the stripping out may not be advisable, but you can. So let's see. Okay, I didn't change that word. I don't think I changed that word templates. Anyway, let's see. The Angular CLI is called NG CLI or something? Angular CLI, okay. So it should say Angular CLI. So each framework has their own CLI, right? And I'll tell you the difference here. And it stands for Command Line Interface. React creates the project for you without configuration options out of the gate. So you type create React app, and it says it there. npx create React app, hello world, and boom, it's done. As you can see, it just goes, right? Okay, so that's fine. That's just the way React does it. And a lot of these things aren't bad or good. It's just the way it is. Angular offers a small amount of initial configuration. So I think there's two things. Do you want routing, and do you want, what kind of preprocessor for your styling, right? But other than that, it just creates it for you. But one really cool thing about the Angular CLI is that you can create your components, your services. There's like another one. You can do a bunch of stuff, but it's pretty cool. You actually use the CLI throughout your project, creating your project, right? So it's pretty involved. But now the Vue CLI is like it says here in the middle. You have a lot of choices, right? So really, the Vue's idea was to make, creating the application and using it flexible. Pretty flexible and non-opinionated. And that's, I think, what it's achieved. Yeah. So single file components. So this is an example of if you do like ng generate component hello world or header, right? Or footer. This is what it's going to create. It's going to do a TypeScript file, right? Which is the logic. Here's your test. Here's your styles and your template. So that's that, right? And it's cool because it does all these folders, and then you just go in the folder and you edit this stuff, right? So it's a little different. It's a different concept. That's how. So it's not a single. This doesn't look. So it's not a single file component. It's like a 3-file component kind of. Okay. For React, it's not a single file component, but you can use some libraries like Glamour. What's the other one? Styled components, I think. Let's see if I have it in here. It's on another page, but you can use packages or libraries where you can have your CSS right in the component. So if you have a footer component in React, you're going to get the logic on the top, and then also, you can put in with JavaScript the CSS as well as objects, and then at the bottom you'll have your template. That's basically how that could be. So it could be a single file component. That's the way the trend is going, but you have to understand JavaScript pretty good. With Vue, again, the concept is that someone can pick this up real quickly if you don't know JavaScript very well, but you know HTML. You can go to town with it. Single file components, I will show you, and I wonder how close we are. We're kind of far, okay. But single file components for Vue, again, you have your template, your logic, and your styles. So it's easily maintainable. You just have one file for everything, and it's just a different concept, different way to do things. A similar answer here, where Angular component styling is in a separate file. So we've got that. CSS is optional, and we went over that. But one thing I wanted to add is that within your style tag at the bottom of your, let's say, footer component for Vue, you can say lang, which you can just choose CSS or something like that. But you can type in the attribute scoped to where only that style, those styles, it is contained within that one file or component. An example that where you wouldn't want to do that is if you're in like the app, kind of the top level that contains a lot of the other components. That's when you wouldn't do scope, and you just define all the styles for the whole project, basically, or the whole app. All right, so Angular's massive, right? Not only the design of the application, but you have to learn TypeScript. It's not, it just depends. Is it a bad thing? You just have to learn it, right? Other factors make it quite the effort to get ramped up. Okay, so UG and then some. It's complex. Okay. It's just the nature of the beast. React, with its JSX or JavaScript heavy syntax, makes it a steep learning curve as well, just depending, obviously, on who you are. Vue, on the other hand, with template-based syntax, provides the best possible offering to get an application up and running within a day if you play your cards right. So, I mean, this is subjective, right? But if you look at, just kind of, I don't know, JavaScript. JavaScript's complicated. Maybe HTML is less complicated. Just like it says, bada bing, bada boom. It just takes less time to create an app for Vue, for what it's worth. So, but does that mean is that something you should use? No, not necessarily. It's a plus, I think. So let's look at some anatomy of Vue. So first off, the objective in creating Vue.js was to take the best from AngularJS, Angular, Ember, React, and other frameworks, and even concepts from Elm, which in the docs referenced Vuex. Okay, I don't know Elm, but apparently they used Elm to be inspired to create, a better state management library. So, Vue to the rescue, right? Here to solve problems better, faster, to make things easier for us all. That's the clarion call. I think I read that somewhere in the docs. Let's take a look at some code here. So this first example is if you just, for example, let's say you have a page in your website that's built in React. You can pull in, just like a library, you can pull in this library, this Vue library, just like it is here, and create a new Vue instance. And where it says L, which stands for element, you can basically attach it to the div up top. And all of a sudden, you can use Vue. So in my opinion, that's kind of cool. I don't know. I don't know if you think it's cool, but I think it's cool. So that is the Vue instance. You can plug it in any framework. You just plug it in, which means that you can try it out. You don't have to create a whole project, right? That's a Vue project just to try Vue out, which can be a cool benefit. So as you see on line 10, it says data, right? That's where all your data is stored, and product is plugged in, and it's going to say boots are in stock. So here's if you create it through the CLI. For each component, you set it up like so. Template, script, style. And I left those div tags in there on line 2 because it'll give you an error if you don't have there's a term for it, encapsulating or something like that, wrapping divs. So you have to have those divs. You can put attributes in those divs, like an ID for the page or something, or for the component. With double curly braces, you can perform basic data binding called text interpolation. Notice styles below with the scoped attribute indicating that the styles are scoped to that component only, which is on the right. So that's, pretty self-explanatory, right? So you could just build your project like that. The next thing is directives, which encapsulate DOM manipulations. Directives can be custom made, as stated before. And here's a list of most of the out-of-the-box directives that Vue provides. So let's look at a couple of them. So you can do conditional statement. You can do if-else statements, right? So for example, and it's a Boolean, right? So if type equals A, then show that div, right? So I could replace that with true. If true, then it would show A, right? And then you go down the line, right? So that's cool. That's kind of cool, I think, right? And these are not necessary, but they're just a convenience, right? Less code, less characters, smaller app size. So that's kind of cool. vModel. So it's restricted to these. Let me think. So component, like when you import your component in and use it in another component or page, you can use vModel. But input, select, and text area. So here's an example. This is a component, vModel, loving Vue. So there's going to be a value attached to that. And when it's updated, So this is a checkbox, right? So when the checkbox is checked, down in data, like let's say in data, under message, we have checkbox false. When it's checked, it's going to automatically say true, like right away. Superpower, right? So vShow. So yeah, it's a toggle. It has a toggle feature. Let's see. So yeah, so vbind is a directive that binds. So reactivity, right? That's another word that's important when it comes to frameworks. Things need to be reactive. So if there was no vbind, then you would, just paste the URL up at the top, and it'd be fine, right? But what if you, oh, here's an example. Like I had to do a sign-in page that had an eyeball, right? And if I wanted to see the password to double check it, I'd click on it, and the eyeball would have a slash through it, right? So that's a simple example. And so what would happen is I would bind that to the data to where when I click on it, the URL would change because it was reactive to the user's, actions. So that's an example. Let's see, V4. So you can loop through, right? So let's say you could pull in an array that has Monday, Wednesday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, right? You've got the days of the week or something, and you want those iterated over. You could have days, like day in day, and that would come in, and you could loop through that. And that's cool. I like that. So here's another V or a directive, click, right? And there's a shortcut @click. The HTML, sometimes, so instead of like text, instead of just like text, putting text in like you would do here with message, sometimes you want to format the text with HTML. So that's when you would use the VHTML directive. And you would, spit that out, and all of a sudden you've got a paragraph and cool things happening. So that's an example there, and that's about it. And you can create your own. I've never done that, but it's probably pretty cool. All right, router. So I wanted to show an example of the router. All right, so I just wanted to give you a snapshot of kind of what it looks like, okay? So this is the router file, right? So you're pulling in a library up top, you're pulling in home, and I think it should have search or, no, it's over here. It's importing here, here, and here. So you're not importing, like home could have been imported the same way on line 17. And then basically you define the path, right? These are all just key value pairs. And then you guys should look this up, scroll behavior. This makes sure that when you change routes or change pages, it's at the top, which is kind of cool. So this is the route page that you create, right? Where the view will change. So view router on line 4, that's where you put, like you have to put that on the page that's going to change, right? And it's on, I think, what? Just the app page. So that's where you put that. Okay, router link. This is what it looks like when you're in the menu, and you list out search and home and about and contact us and stuff. That's what you do right there. And then this is the main.js file. This is just putting in the router, pulling in the router, and including it in your instance as a whole. So that's the router. Vue State Management. Okay, this is a tall file here. So you're pulling in Vuex. let me see here. Let me see if I've got, okay. So the idea here, and I wanted to point something out, if you want to destructure, right? You've got to put, these mutation actions, getters and stuff, you have to create a variable and export it, or else I had a hard time trying to figure out how to access it. I don't think you can. So this is how I would format your Vuex file. It's the store.js file. Okay, so you've got your state. That's great, right? Pretty self-explanatory. Mutations, you pull in state, and then you change the state. Actions is something I don't use too often, probably should, but it tells the mutation to do something, basically. It doesn't mutate, but it tells the mutation to do something. And then getters are something you use for, you can import them in and do a calculation based on the state. So you do calculations using state. And that's pretty much it. You do your store, call it good, there you go. Okay, so that's state. Within the instance, you see the data option, which will contain data, let's see here, that's right, that can be bound to the template. On the right are other options that are used within the Vue instance. So we talked about data, right? So that's great. You keep your data in your component. But you also can use prop, or you can list your props there. And as I put there, I also added, you can do it two ways. You can just make a list and have it available, or you can do a type. You can, I don't know what you call it, type, assign a type to it. So it's somewhat like TypeScript a little bit. When you pull a component in, it has to be, I think, instantiated. I don't know if that's the right word, but it has to be listed in this component option. Watch, as you see count up in data. When count changes, watch will fire and say counter has changed, or it'll calculate something. And then computed is, here's an example of mapping the state and making just is authenticated, which is a Boolean, available so that you can use it in your template, which is up above. Methods, it's just a normal method. And then mixins are, mixins are methods that also have the, ability or have options as well, kind of like components. So it's like a function that's like a component type of thing, where in the mixins you can have all of these, which is kind of cool. And this is like an example of lifecycle. So that's options, and there's more. So mixins are functions. Let's see. Yeah. So the reason why a mixin is important is because if you have 14 pages, like I had this, if you have 14 pages that has the same function, you don't want to write 14 functions. You want to write a mixin and then import that mixin, right? Put it here, and boom, you're using that function. A mixin object can contain any component options. Like I said, when a component uses a mixin, all options in the mixin will be mixed into the component's own options. Okay, so here are my concluding thoughts about why you might love Vue. It's performant. I'll just read it. Incredibly easy to pick up. It's lightweight, scales up as well as down. Single file components are standard. It's unopinionated and highly configurable application creations in the CLI. I think the real first, I think another delineator is the job market for framework skill. Let me go over like jobs for Vue for a second. No surprise that Vue is behind the pack here. This is based on job listings. So you see React, and there's a lot of graphs you can look at, but it is true that Vue is behind the pack. If you know one of the three, though, even as Vue developer, that can go a long way. So many jobs I'm seeing ask for like either you know Vue, React, or Angular. Do you know one of the three? And once you learn one framework, then it's pretty easy to learn the others. So I'm not like a super smart guy, but I've used all of them, right? And I don't know what that means, but you just start to learn and understand things, right? And the one thing I wanted to point out too is just understanding what it means and the process to learn a framework, right? To use a framework to create applications, that's a whole nother process. That's like a whole different thing where you're like understanding, okay, it's not HTML and CSS, JavaScript files anymore. It's like got this structure now, and I'm importing this, and I'm using libraries and Webpack. That's a whole nother thing. So once you learn that, that's also a learning curve. So that's why learning like a second framework, isn't necessarily you're not starting from scratch type of thing. So, and Vue, the Vue community also has Vue Jobs as a website. So front-end developer, Vue and React, So just because it says Vue jobs aren't out there doesn't mean they're not out there. Let's see, I would go to the docs, documentation. Vue actually has great documentation. I see some nodding heads. Oh, whoops. What do I have there? So just as you see here, there's just tons of great resources. Jobs, blog, awesome Vue. Oh my gosh. So, it's not up there. I'm sorry. So right here, awesome Vue. I think, actually I'm not sure now that I think about it, but there's this link that goes to this list in GitHub of like hundreds of resources and repositories and just all kinds of stuff for Vue. It's called like Vue Awesome. And that might be it, Awesome Vue. So that's awesome. That's amazing. Okay, here's some free stuff here. YouTube, of course, is good. You just got to watch out for how what old the stuff is, right? SitePoint has a fantastic article called Up and Running with Vue. Larcas, learn Vue 2 step by step. So Vue is on version 2. The CLI is on version 3. Egghead is not free, but it has this really long, let's see, I can't remember if it's an article. No, I think it is a, what do you call it? Yeah, thank you. A course. Develop basic web apps with Vue. And Scrimba, who's used Scrimba? You can like edit the code. It's like a video, but you can edit the code in the video and change it up. It's crazy technology. It's really cool. So Scrimba has a great course on it. The other thing is, it's new to me. I don't know if it was new to you guys. Okay. Yeah, Vue Mastery. So these are some paid ones. Vue Mastery. I took, you guys know who Maximilian Mueller is, or whatever his name is? Max? He's amazing. Like, he does courses on all three of these frameworks. But I took one from him on Udemy for Vue. Code Academy is kind of expensive, but they've got some Vue stuff, and Vue School is good too. Okay? Last thing I'll say, second to last thing. Slack. So we have UtahJS Group has a Vue channel that has some great guys on there that know their stuff with Vue. Fed, I don't know if you're a part of Fed, front-end developer group. They have a great Vue channel. Okay. Discord has, it's called VueLand, and it has thousands of people that talk about Vue all over the world. Linus Borg is one guy that's phenomenal. I've seen him on what's that? Stack Overflow, right? And he's great. I've talked to him. He's in Germany. But this is good if you want to get into Vue. Okay. Other than that, that's it.
I have a question on the router page.
Yep. Heart attack here. Sorry. Are we there?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I see at the top we imported home from that. In other routers, like you have to import that page and then throw that link into it. Are you not needing, like, is that, like, you're throwing that component down below? We don't have to import those above the router itself?
So you're talking about these guys?
Yeah.
So you're talking about like line 27, 22, 17?
Yeah, whereas on line 12, like, we don't have that. You just have the component home. Are those just multiple ways of importing that as in that router, or?
Yeah, that's two ways. So if you see component, colon, right, this is ES6, I think. That's a function. And perhaps import is a method that just pulls that in. I don't know, but yeah, that's just, those are two ways you can do it. What's the advantage?
I'm guessing one's dynamic. Like this function import, that's got to be a dynamic import. So when you come to this component, it automatically will import home, but these other ones don't get imported until they're pulled up on that page.
Could that be lazy loading? Maybe that's lazy loading. Okay. So what lazy loading might be, I'm not an expert in this, but it's you don't have to load everything until it's needed, right? That's lazy loading, I think.
So essentially it's saying, here's the link to it, don't do anything until you go to that route.
Yeah. And is this a...
We had them all up there. Once this file came in, it would load all those.
Right, so it's streamlining it, just making it a little bit
Dynamic.
A little bit less intensive loading.
Yeah. Yeah, and in the docs, it talks about lazy loading in a lot of these frameworks. It might be an ES6, 7. You know, it might be a feature that's just the community wants. So, but any other questions?
I had a question about how the state. I saw your state management page. Maybe I just missed it. I wasn't sure how to access the state from the component. Do you? Because I don't actually see the component there.
So what do you want to do? You want to access the state in the component and use it in the component?
Yeah, no, I just used the action.
So you can. Okay, so I'll show you.
So that is the actual component.
Let's look at something here. It's back a couple. Nope. Okay, it's right here. Okay, so okay, so look at line. Where are we? Look at line 13. Okay, so first of all, this is a component, and you're right. I didn't really label these and tell you this is this page, right? But you can see this is the header, right, on line 19. So we're talking about the header. And then you look at line 13, and you are pulling in the library Vuex, which you have to do every time on a component if you're going to use state, right? Okay. So then you've got map state, which is a I don't know the term, but it's a feature. We'll call it a feature. It's something that that comes with Vuex. And then on line 38, you use a spread operator, map state, and there's a function, right? And then I'm taking here is authenticated, which is just false if you're not logged in and true if you are, right? So then you take that, and the template is above, right? So in the template, you're going to, so we saw a directive that said like vif, right? So I would use this is authenticated, has a value, I'd use that as an attribute. So v-if, in parentheses, is authenticated. And if it's true, then that div is going to show, which ultimately there's 3 links in this application that will show or will not show. So you either put it, so that's kind of how that works. So again, you have to map it and pull it in through this library Vuex, this map state. You can also map getters, map actions. You don't need to map mutations, but the other 3 you can. Does that make sense? Almost. Okay. All right. Anything to add or any questions? Any disagreements or anything to correct on Angular, React? Anything? Okay. Just so you know, my company is always hiring. See me after if you want an opportunity. But other than that, I really appreciate you guys tonight. So, no, that's it.